There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream, it simmers. The kind that lingers quietly beneath your conversations, your silence, your smiles. You can be with someone you love and still feel a wall inside you, built from things left unsaid, wounds unhealed, apologies never spoken. We think time heals all things, but time without forgiveness just hardens the scar tissue. And until we learn how to forgive, truly forgive, we stay chained to the moment we were hurt. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about setting yourself free. Forgiveness has become one of those words we throw around casually, like it's easy, like it's just a matter of saying, it's okay, and moving on. But anyone who's ever been deeply hurt in a relationship knows it's not that simple. Forgiveness isn't a gesture. It's not a favor you do for someone else. It's an act of courage, a quiet, internal decision to stop letting pain define the way you love. Because when you've been betrayed, disappointed, or neglected, something shifts inside you. You stop trusting so easily. You build subtle defenses. You start interpreting kindness through suspicion. And even if the relationship continues, even if the person apologizes, a part of you holds back. Forgiveness is the process of loosening that grip, not because what happened didn't matter, but because you've decided that your peace matters more. In many ways, forgiveness is the first step in healing, not the last. We often imagine healing begins when the other person changes, or when justice is served, or when time finally dulls the sting. But real healing starts the moment you choose to release the bitterness, when you stop rehearsing the story of how you were wronged and start reclaiming your own emotional life. That doesn't mean you forget what happened. It doesn't mean you deny it. In fact, true forgiveness requires that you see the harm clearly. You have to name it, feel it, grieve it. Forgiveness isn't about minimizing the wound. It's about refusing to let it own you. Think of bitterness like a parasite. It feeds on your energy, your joy, your ability to stay present. It might feel like protection, a shield against being hurt again, but over time, it becomes a prison. You carry that anger into every interaction, every new connection. You become reactive, closed, afraid. Forgiveness is what breaks that cycle. It's what returns you to yourself. But let's be honest, it's not always motivated by love. Sometimes we forgive because we're tired, because holding on to the pain is exhausting, because we want to feel something other than rage or numbness. And that's okay. You don't need a noble reason to begin. You just need a willingness to stop letting the past keep stealing from your present. There are profound benefits to forgiveness, not just relationally, but psychologically. Studies in both neuroscience and psychology show that forgiveness reduces anxiety, improves heart health, strengthens immunity, and increases emotional resilience. It's not just something we should do, it's something we're biologically and emotionally wired to need. In relationships, forgiveness is what makes long-term connection possible. No matter how deeply you love someone, they will inevitably disappoint you, and you will disappoint them. That's not dysfunction, that's reality. We are imperfect beings trying to love each other in imperfect ways. What makes love sustainable isn't perfection, it's the ability to repair. Forgiveness is the foundation of that repair. It allows us to acknowledge the rupture without ending the relationship. It creates the conditions for growth, both in ourselves and in the connection. It says, I see the worst moment between us, and I still choose to believe this isn't the end of the story. But forgiveness isn't something you do once and forget about. It's a daily decision, a choice you make over and over again, to soften, to stay open, to let go of the version of yourself that's defined by hurt. It requires strength, vulnerability, and above all, a commitment to your own peace. Because at the end of the day, forgiveness isn't just about saving a relationship. It's about saving yourself from being swallowed by what someone else did to you. It sounds simple when we say it. Just forgive and move on. But if you've ever tried to forgive someone who truly hurt you, someone who shattered your trust, betrayed your vulnerability, or left wounds that haven't fully healed, you know the truth. Forgiveness is one of the hardest things you'll ever do. Because forgiveness asks you to do something deeply unnatural. It asks you to let go of the anger that's been protecting you. It asks you to stop rehearsing the story where you were the victim and they were the villain. And it asks you to step into a future where the past no longer holds power over you, even when a part of you still wants justice, still wants answers, still wants the pain to be acknowledged. One of the first things we need to understand is that forgiveness is not the same as condoning. It's not saying what they did was okay. It's not pretending it didn't hurt. In fact, to truly forgive, you have to fully acknowledge the depth of what happened. You have to face the betrayal, the disappointment, the broken expectations, without flinching. Forgiveness requires truth, not denial. And it's not about forgetting either. That old saying, forgive and forget, can be incredibly damaging because memory serves a purpose. It protects us, teaches us, shapes us. You can remember what happened and still forgive. In fact, remembering is often necessary to rebuild wiser, more honest relationships in the future. Another common misconception is that forgiveness equals reconciliation, but those are two separate paths. You can forgive someone and still choose not to let them back into your life. You can forgive and still set boundaries. You can forgive and still protect your peace. Forgiveness is about your internal release, not your external obligation. And yet, one of the biggest blocks to forgiveness is the fear that it makes us weak, that letting go means giving in, that choosing peace means forfeiting power. But nothing could be further from the truth. Forgiveness is not passive. It's not a surrender. It's one of the most active, intentional choices you can make to stop letting your pain run the show. In fact, forgiveness is an act of defiance. It says, you don't get to keep hurting me, even in memory. You don't get to control my story anymore. It reclaims the emotional territory that hurt once occupied and gives it back to you, slowly, steadily, and sometimes painfully. That pain is real. Forgiving someone can feel like betraying yourself, especially when the hurt goes deep. You may wonder, if I forgive them, am I saying what they did didn't matter? Am I invalidating my own suffering? These questions are normal. They arise because forgiveness requires complexity. It forces you to hold two truths at once. I was hurt, and I choose to release the grip of that hurt. That tension is uncomfortable, but it's also where the healing lives. This is why forgiveness often takes time. It can't be forced. You can't will yourself into it just because someone wants you to move on. Sometimes, the person who hurt you will demand forgiveness long before you're ready, and that pressure can create more damage. True forgiveness can't be extracted. It has to be given freely, and only when your heart has made that shift from survival to release. In long-term relationships, this process is even more complicated. You may still love the person who hurt you. You may see their efforts to change. You may want to repair, but every time you try, the memory creeps back in. Forgiveness, then, becomes not a one-time act, but a daily practice of choosing to see the person in front of you instead of the mistake behind them, not blindly, not naively, but with openness. The philosopher Hannah Arendt once wrote that forgiveness is the only way to reverse the irreversible. You can't undo what happened, but you can change the meaning it holds in your life. You can decide that it doesn't define you and that it doesn't dictate the kind of person you want to be. Because here's the hardest part of all. Forgiveness often isn't for them. It's for you. It's the way you say, I deserve peace more than I deserve revenge. I deserve my future more than I need to stay in my past. Forgiveness doesn't happen all at once. It's not a light switch. It's more like peeling away layers of pain, of ego, of expectation, until you reach something softer underneath. And that softness isn't weakness. It's your strength returning in a new form, quiet, steady, open. The process usually begins with acknowledgement, not just of what happened, but of how it impacted you. This is where many people get stuck. They rush to move on before they've even let themselves feel the weight of the wound. But you can't release something you haven't truly held. So before forgiveness, there must be honesty. Sit with the pain, name it, speak it, even if only to yourself. Let it matter. Then comes the understanding, not of the person who hurt you, not yet, but of yourself. Why did this cut so deeply? What did it trigger in you? What part of your identity, or safety, or sense of worth was shaken? This isn't about blaming yourself. It's about knowing yourself, because the more clearly you see your pain, the less power it has to control you. Only after this can you begin to let go, not because you're ready to forget, but because you're ready to live forward. This is where real forgiveness begins, not in forcing a feeling, but in choosing your future over your fixation. It's not a moment, it's a direction. Some days, you'll take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. That's normal. Healing isn't linear, and forgiveness isn't perfect. For some, Therapy becomes a lifeline during this stage. Talking to someone neutral, someone who can hold your anger without judgment, gives you room to process. For others, it's journaling, writing letters you don't send, having imaginary conversations that allow the pain to find language. Some find solace in support groups, books, prayer, or meditation. What matters most isn't the method, it's that you're engaged with the pain, not avoiding it. And eventually, there's a moment, subtle, often quiet, where you feel something shift. You stop clenching. You stop needing them to hurt the way you did. You stop replaying the past to keep your anger alive. Instead, you begin to imagine a life beyond the wound. That's when you know forgiveness has started to take root. From here, reconciliation might be possible, but only if both people are willing. Forgiveness opens the door, but reconciliation is what happens when the other person walks through it with honesty, accountability, and effort. It requires deep communication, genuine remorse, and clear boundaries. And even then, rebuilding trust takes time. There's no shortcut through that, only presence. But even when reconciliation isn't possible, even when the person is gone, or unwilling to change, or unsafe to return to, forgiveness can still offer freedom. It can still allow you to let go of the emotional grip they have on your life. It can still empower you to build new relationships, new stories, new meanings from what once felt like only loss. In this way, forgiveness becomes something more than emotional hygiene. It becomes an act of personal evolution. It teaches you how to love without losing yourself, how to let go without erasing the lesson, how to remain soft in a world that asks you to harden. And perhaps most importantly, forgiveness teaches you how to forgive yourself for the times you stayed too long, for the words you didn't say, for the boundaries you didn't hold, for the love you gave before you had enough for yourself. Because self-forgiveness is where true healing begins, and where real love becomes possible again. There is no one way to forgive, no timeline, no formula. Some wounds take years, some never fully close, but even in that, there's movement. Forgiveness doesn't always look like peace. Sometimes it looks like trying again, trusting again, loving with the scar still visible, but no longer bleeding. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "What was silent in the father speaks in the son," and I often found in the child that the father had not yet been forgiven. Pain moves through generations when it isn't metabolized. Forgiveness stops that cycle, not by erasing the past, but by refusing to pass it on. So ask yourself, what are you still carrying that isn't yours to hold anymore? Whose apology are you still waiting for? And what might happen if you gave yourself the permission to begin, not for them, but for you? Because forgiveness doesn't mean the past didn't happen. It means you finally decided it doesn't get to control what happens next.